Okay, so welcome to week 2 of these 4 free weekly sessions we're having to celebrate the beginning of summer. And if you missed last week's, as I just mentioned before hitting record, I'm going to be leaving the recording up for a few more days in case you're new and you just missed that and you'd like to know more. If you are wondering what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to have a look at, a bit like last week, we had a kind of very detailed look at what we can change with our breathing. This week we're going to have a more broad conversation about why breathwork has come to us at this time and where it might be going. So it's kind of a broader, what is breathwork? What is its purpose? Where might it fit into other systems that we might have for our health? Whereas last week was very specific. I'm going to reveal to you now our special guests. That's quite exciting, isn't it? So next week and the following week, we're going to have 2 mystery special guests. And our special guests, I can now reveal, are going to be, next week, we're going to have Dr. Belisa Vranic. So some of you may have seen me interview her before. She is the amazing author of 2 incredible books about breathwork. First one being Breathe, which is available as an audiobook and really lovely, relaxing, very informative about the physical act of breathing. But Dr. Belisa is a psychologist and she's very interested in the psychological effects of breathing as well. And she went on to write a book called Breathing for Warriors, which is about, she kept getting questions about, how should we breathe when we're exercising and all that kind of stuff that I'm definitely not an expert in, but she is. And so she's going to teach us some kind of functional breathing methods. And her workshop, if you've ever done it before, she always remixes it every time she does it. So please do feel free to come to that. But she essentially helps us to unlock new levels to our breathing, helps us to realize there's probably a lot more potential for us to move our bodies as we breathe than we realize, and how that can be incredibly healthy for us. So I'm really looking forward to having her on this session next week. And then we're going to put what she teaches us into practice, and I'll guide us in a guided session. And then the following week, so the final of the 4 free sessions, will be with Vijamala Birch. And Vijamala, if you don't know who she is also an amazing author. She's the author of quite a few books at this point about mindfulness meditation. And her journey is quite unique. She was put into a wheelchair at the age of, I think, 17 due to a back injury that also caused her a lot of chronic pain. And so she had to deal with that in ways that she could find, and the only way she could find that was really helpful for her was meditation. So she became a Buddhist, and she's gone on to specialize in teaching meditation for chronic pain. And what she realized was that that was very relevant to emotional pain as well. And so she and I are going to have a kind of open discussion that you're welcome to join about the connections between breathwork and meditation. So what are the differences? How can they help each other? Can they be done at the same time? All these juicy questions was what we're going to go into. And she's an amazing teacher. She's my mentor. So she taught me to teach meditation a number of years ago. She's an absolutely incredible teacher. So I'm really looking forward to having her in the session with us. And she's actually the last person, or among the last sort of 10 people to be honoured by the Queen before the Queen died with an OBE, which is for the people who are not from the UK, like one of the highest honours you can get as a person living in England. So because of the amount of help she's given to other people suffering with pain and things like that. So really, really fantastic guests that we're going to have. So hopefully you can join me for those if either of those sound good to you. Very, very nice and relaxing way of spending a Sunday evening. And for those of you who missed last week's session, it was just little old me giving you a crash course in the framework I use to think about breathwork, so that if you come to any breathwork session with any breathwork teacher, you can understand or have a grasp of what it is that they're changing in your breath that's helping you change your experience. So we talked about why breath is so powerful in terms of how it can immediately impact our nervous system in positive ways, how it's changing our blood chemistry in positive ways, and even our brain waves and the different modal networks of the brain can be changed by breathing in different ways. And how we discovered that was by isolating all the different things we could change in our breath. So the most obvious ones being speed and the depth of the breath, changing whether we're breathing in through the mouth or the nose, and we discovered that there was over 20, I think almost 30, that we could control almost immediately. And we talked about that having an impact on what we can objectively see in the body. So it's changing our biomarkers with every breath, changing our pulse, changing our blood pressure, changing all these things that we can measure and we will be measuring during the Breathe in Harmony course, which will begin in 3 weeks' time. So if you are an Aria Breath member, just because I've received questions in my emails this week, if you're already an Aria Breath member, you are already welcome to join that course. If you're wondering what that means, being an Aria Breath member just means going to ariabreath.com, joining, and you get access to the lifetime access to the Aria Breath app, where you can listen to hundreds of pieces of music that guide your breathing. And there's also courses in the app and lovely interviews as well with lots and lots of really amazing experts, because I'm obsessed with slow rhythmic breathing. And so that's what we talked about last week, all the different elements, the particular favorite variables that I like to play with when I'm coaching people to breathe. And this week I wanted to have more of a broad sort of, how do we call it? Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to describe this. I just called the session Breathwork a Deeper Purpose, because what we're going to look at is, why is breathwork so popular now? Where did it come from? I mentioned last week that when I wrote that book, Draw Breath, in 2019, when I submitted it to the publisher, the title was Draw Breath, The Art of Breathwork. And they changed it, and I said, oh, don't change it, I really like that. And they said, no, we're going to call it The Art of Breathing and Meditation, because breathwork's not a real word. And I was quite shocked by that, because I'd obviously been in the very niche world of breathwork for a while then. But obviously that's completely changed now. Pretty much everyone has heard of breathwork. So why might that be? How does this fit into a wider sort of cultural trend that we're experiencing? And why is that happening, and where is it going? So that's the theme of today. And by the end, I hope you'll feel that you may already have some of the skills that all of this is leading towards. And so I'm going to begin by talking about my own journey into health. So when I was in my late teens, I had depression for various reasons. And back then we didn't have mindfulness meditation, really. This is back in the early 2000s. That wasn't until maybe 2010 that came around. We certainly didn't have breathwork in its current iteration. We had yoga, but it was not cool in the way that it is now, especially for young men. When I did go to yoga classes back then, I was probably the only man in most of them, and definitely the only man under sort of 30 or 40. But the thing that did really appeal to me was something called CBT. So maybe give me a wave in the chat or an emoji in the chat if you've heard of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. That was really, really trendy, really, really popular. It still is, but it was really popular in the early 2000s. If you haven't heard of it before, it stands for cognitive behavioral therapy. And the cognitive should give you a clue as to what exactly it is. It's about thinking. So changing how we think, meaning leading to changing our behaviors. And it's a really, really useful set of tools, I would say, rather than a tool. It's lots of different things that you can learn about the way your mind works that lead to you being able to challenge negative thoughts. And this is things like noticing when you're catastrophizing, right? So if you're in an anxious state and you start to think, oh my God, this is going to go wrong and this is going to go wrong, noticing what that's like and tools to deal with it, noticing the cognitive biases that we have towards negative thinking a lot of the time, because it's our mind trying to keep us safe. And let's see, what else is in CBT? It's simple things like saying, so what? So let's say something negative's happened and you're like, oh my God, this thing happened. And I actually asking yourself, well, so what? Well, it means that this might not happen, this other thing might not happen. Well, so what? And so actually challenging or thinking your negative thoughts all the way through. So really useful stuff. Probably the most lasting model from CBT, or certainly the way I learned it, something called the ABC model. And I'm going to show you what that looks like, because I think it's a helpful first step to understand what was missing from CBT. And that is the journey we're going to go on. Each iteration of these well-being trends fills in a blank from the previous one. And so we're going to discover what breathwork maybe filled in a blank for a few years ago, and what breathwork's blanks might be. So where might this all be going next? And so I'm going to share my screen with you guys. So last week we looked at the breath elements, which is changing all these elements leading to changing how we're feeling in our bodies. But yeah, so CBT, the ABCs of CBT. The ABC model is a way of looking at how we have experiences in our lives that lead to emotions. And this is a model that's used in CBT. The idea being that there's an activating event, something happens in our life, and we experience consequential emotions. So maybe something that we perceive as negative happens, we experience negative emotions about that. We can't really change this thing. It's already happened, or it was already going to happen. It might be something in the future that's definitely going to happen. The consequential emotions, they're already happening. We maybe can't change those. But to get from A to C, we need B, and that is the beliefs that we have about the event. And if we can change the beliefs, this is the model of CBT, if we can change the beliefs about that event, we can change the consequential emotions. Now, a really clear example of this is an example that's almost always given in these scenarios, right? Is you're walking down the street and you see your friend that you haven't seen in a while over there, and you give them a wave and they just completely ignore you and they just carry on walking like they haven't seen you. And so how might you feel in that scenario? You're probably going to feel a bit down on yourself, maybe a bit of anger towards you. What have I ever done to them? All of these feelings might come up due to that event. The activating event has led to consequential negative emotions. But CBT is learning about the fact that your beliefs about that event is actually the thing that's leading to these consequential emotions. So your belief is, they ignored me. The belief a corresponding belief might be, I must have done something to upset them, or maybe they've turned mean, they don't like me, whatever those thoughts are that are leading to that consequential emotion. Becoming aware of those thoughts and challenging those thoughts is going to lead to a different emotional experience. And just to give you an example of what might have happened with your friend, so I'm completely blind without my glasses. I'm wearing contact lenses right now. And I know for a fact that lots of people I know go to my gym. It's quite a big, gym, one of those open gyms. I know loads of people that go there. I've never seen anyone there that I know. But I must have done. I'm just not wearing my glasses, right? So there's probably lots of times people I know have had this experience with me and then gone away and thinking, God, that Tom, what a bastard. He just completely blanks me every time I see him. I don't know what I did. Maybe I did something when I was drunk. So people are probably having this experience with me. If we can challenge the beliefs about the event, we can change how we feel about it. And this is relevant not just to that kind of event, all the events we're experiencing in our lives. If we look at any negative emotion we're having, we can do this retroactively, right? I'm feeling bad, maybe it's because of this thing that happened. So far, so good. However, this model requires us to be aware of the beliefs that we're having, to be aware of the thoughts that we're having. And 99 times out of 100, we're not aware of our thoughts. And so this is what was really popular in the early 2000s, and then mindfulness came along. Mindfulness makes us aware of the thoughts. The process of mindfulness is noticing whatever's happening. That can be sensory experience in the body, but most of the time the way mindfulness is taught in the West, it's about using the sensory experience of the body as an anchor from which we can then have a different perspective on our thoughts. Notice the thoughts as they're happening, notice the thoughts as they're occurring, and that gives us a whole different perspective on thoughts that really leads us to a much clearer ability to challenge those thoughts, or at least have perspective on them. I did remember my water this week. And in America, mindfulness has a slightly different flavor to the mindfulness in the UK. In America, mindfulness was popularized by John Kabat-Zinn, mindfulness-based stress reduction. In the UK, it was popularized by someone called Professor Mark Williams, MBCT, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. And that's because Professor Mark Williams could see that this was the missing piece in CBT. Unless we're aware of the thoughts, this doesn't really help because it's always after the fact. But if we can be aware of our thoughts as they're happening, we have a different perspective on them, we can be a lot more creative with how we respond to them, and we have a lot more agency over our own lives. We can take responsibility for our thoughts and our emotions in a very different way. This iteration makes the first iteration more powerful, right? So CBT is great, but it's much better if we can be mindful of the thoughts as they're happening. And that's what MBCT is. So one of the reasons that mindfulness became so incredibly popular in the 2010s was the fact that it fixed this, I don't want to say problem, but it's like an added expansion pack or something to CBT that makes it so much more effective. And what I would say is that what happened next is everyone got really into mindfulness, but they were using it as a way of trying to get rid of stress. And this is certainly how mindfulness apps were promoted. So things like Calm app and Headspace that, catapulted mindfulness from just books into something even much more popular. And we have to remember that at the time, apps were kind of new. Apps had only sort of come about in the late noughties. So these apps were massively influential in terms of how people began to approach and think about meditation. And what they did was make meditation a lot about thinking, but also the way they were talking about meditation was, this is something that alleviates stress. Which is true, but not necessarily in the moment, because we have to do a lot of work with our thoughts to overcome them with mindfulness, if that makes sense. Now, what we know, because we're interested in breathwork, is that when you study your breath, as is the goal in mindfulness, your breath slows down. We might have had this experience if we had our first experience of breathwork last week, and we may have noticed that as soon as we started to have our hand on our heart and our hand on our belly, the breath just naturally started to slow down. And this is one of those strange things where some people are writing papers now about how possibly the reason that meditation has an immediate impact on our stress is actually that it causes us to unconsciously do breath work. Now, that's not to take anything away from how powerful meditation is and can be. It's still a fantastic tool. But what it meant was people began to realize, hey, meditation is this focus on the breath. And in meditation, I'm being told, don't change how you're breathing, just pay attention to your breath. But what I'm realizing is, if I change the way I'm breathing, I can pay attention in a different way. Because if you breathe at 20 breaths per minute, for example, you're going to have a very different kind of awareness and ability to pay attention than you do at 10 breaths per minute or 5 breaths per minute. If you're breathing at a slower rate, your attention changes, becomes more even and balanced, and it's actually much easier to notice the thoughts as they're happening. It's much easier to be aware of your body, to direct your attention on purpose. So to summarize that, so where we are so far, okay, CBT is very, very useful. Then you add meditation, mindfulness, so that we're aware of the thoughts as they're happening, even more useful. But we can then improve meditation with breathwork, right? And if we were to go even further back than CBT, CBT is almost like a very easy to understand way of looking at the mind versus a lot of what was going on earlier in the 20th century, where we have very complex approaches to psychology, where psychology, the earlier stages of the 20th century, psychology was still kind of embedded with philosophy and in some ways, and then with medicine and others, it hadn't really found its feet yet. And so you have very convoluted systems of understanding the id and the ego and all this Freudian stuff. But the whole of the 20th century in Western psychology is focused on the mind. It's focused on how do we change how this person is thinking. They seem to be behaving strangely. It must be something wrong with their thoughts. And what we get as soon as we get past CBT, past meditation and into breathing, is the realization that actually a lot of the things we want to change are happening in the body first. So I'm just going to share with you a completely made up model, right? This is just me sketching on my thing here. Completely made up model for like how this would work. But just to show you what's missing from contemporary psychology of the 20th century, right? So most of it focuses on thoughts, and it's saying that our thoughts are controlling our emotions. That's a from what we were just discussing about CBT, that's built right in. If we can change this person's thoughts, their emotions will change. But what we've been realizing, collectively over the last sort of 20 years is that actually your emotions, a lot of the time, are leading to your thoughts. The emotion comes first. So it's not as simple as, if I can change how I think, I'll change how I feel. And it's this concoction of thoughts and emotions that is leading to our conscious experience. But there's something missing from this picture, which is our physiology. All the stuff we talked about last week that the breath can help us to change. So what's actually happening with my nervous system today is going to have just as much impact on the thoughts and emotions I'm experiencing as the things that I experience in the outside world, like my friend walking past me on the street and ignoring me. So most of the 20th century, and even up to CBT in the early 2000s, we're focusing on how we can use the mind to change how we feel in the body. And what we're realizing collectively, as a species, but particularly as a Western culture, is that, because it's missing for us and in other cultures maybe not so much, is that actually there's a bottom-up version of this, a body-up version, where actually we can use the body to change how we feel in the mind. And some people do this naturally through exercise, but a lot of the time people are unaware of this connection, right? We're not taught from a young age that, hey, if you do this, you're going to feel like this. And I think about this a lot with food and our relationship to food. We think of flavor as kind of ending right as soon as we swallow the food. So if I eat a chocolate bar, it's delicious, right? And the flavor's over as soon as I've stopped the experience. But actually, my body experiences a flavor of that chocolate bar over the next sort of 2 hours, where I crash and my insulin levels spike and all of that stuff happens, and actually I feel like crap. That's still the chocolate bar causing that reaction in my body, right? But we don't think of that as the flavor because it's happening inside the body. So this isn't just about breath work. This is all the things we can change in our body that change how we feel, from our diet to the amount of sleep that we get, to the amount of movement we do, to when we do that movement. All of these things are what is causing this almost revolution that's happening in podcasts and books and all that, where people are very interested in these buzzwords like biohacking and breath work and all these wonderful ideas. The key here, though, is that we've shifted from just looking at the mind down in terms of how we impact our experience, to also including how we think about what we're doing with the body and how that impacts the mind. So these body up mentalities are coming in. And this did exist in the 20th century with people like Wilhelm Reich. Unfortunately, some of their ideas were so crazy, that they were completely ignored. But if you really go deep into the history of breathwork, things that even seem very contemporary now did exist 100 years ago. Even things like conscious connected breathwork. Wilhelm Reich was doing stuff like that in the early 20th century, but it was very niche. People weren't ready for it. And what has changed, I think, is our collective need for these systems, our collective need, not just because we're stressed, but also I think there's a sense in which as in the West, we have lost religion in our society and lost a kind of communal aspect to spirituality. What religion does, and why, or one of the things that religion does, why it can be very good for us, is that it brings people together with a common belief and common goal, but it also allows us to co-regulate through things like singing and prayer and all these things that use your breath to co-regulate with the people in your community. So I'm not religious, but I do sometimes go to the church near where I live and just listen to the choir because it's so beautiful. And it's almost like the cultures that have had those tools, okay, that bring us together through breath, through chanting, through singing, through dancing, through prayer, all of those cultures have, or rather all of those behaviors have survived because the cultures that practice them have survived. And as we've sort of lost that in the West, we're trying to find, it's just happening organically, we're trying to find that again. And it's through things like yoga, through things like qigong, through things like breathwork, that we can find those things. And so just to bring this back to where we might go next, okay, so if we've had the whole of the 20th century people having very, interesting, but perhaps more convoluted than helpful ideas and systems of understanding the human mind, trying to use the mind to change the body, realizing that perhaps we need to be aware of the thoughts themselves before we can even do that through mindfulness, realizing that perhaps mindfulness can be improved by changing the breath as we're practicing, realizing then that breathwork has even deeper potential than that. So people come to breathwork, or this is presumptive, but 99 out of 100, I would say, people that come to breathwork, they come for initially stress. So they come because they're feeling stress in their life. They've tried lots of other things and they've heard that breathwork might be useful. And what happens is they've come to alleviate something. They've come to alleviate stress. They've come to get rid of the stress that they're experiencing. And what they do at first is they learn simple tools, something like maybe box breathing, that they can use in the moment, right? So just give me a tool, just give me something that I can use. Maybe it's box breathing, and then when they're stressed, they use that. But the really lucky ones discover that actually there's something beyond just the alleviation of stress here. Because what's happening with stress, and this is obviously as simple as I can make it, but stress is we've got too much sympathetic activity in the nervous system, sympathetic being the fight or flight. And we can use our breath to bring that back down, dampen that. On the other side of the pendulum here is the parasympathetic side of the nervous system. This is rest and digest. This is entering restorative states. And so what happens is people come to alleviate stress, but they discover that as they bring the stress down, then there's something below that, which is this deep restorative state that you can achieve with breathwork. And so what we're talking about here is emotional regulation. That's what really it means to get rid of stress. We're regulating our emotions. And I would suggest that there's something even deeper that breathwork does. And that is to release our emotions. And that most of the time during breathwork, because I go to breathwork conferences and events and things like that, and where people begin to talk about across each other, across purposes, is they're not recognizing this distinction between some people are coming to regulate emotion. They're coming with an emotion like stress, if we could call that an emotion, and they just want to get rid of it, and that's emotional regulation, right? Some people are coming for an emotional release. And what I mean by that is that we often suppress our emotions. We often have to, because we are going through life and it's not appropriate for us to express our emotions maybe in the workplace, but we've probably started doing it at a very, very young age. So I was recently, just this week, I was on holiday with my nieces, and they have an emotion and they just express it, right? They scrape their knee or whatever and they cry. Whereas if I scrape my knee, I'd be like, and what I would do is I would probably stop breathing and I would completely suppress that. And that's a skill that we've learned and we all do, to suppress our emotions. And we do it first and foremost through breathing. So when you tell a child to stop crying, they will probably do it by controlling their breath, because their crying is their breathing at that point. And so what they do is they'll hold their breath to stop crying. And we're doing this at some level or another throughout the rest of our lives to suppress our emotions. I'm talking in extremes here with things like crying, but every time you receive an email in your workplace that's stressful, okay, you're probably not allowed to express that emotion immediately. You're probably not allowed to say, whatever it is you'd like to say about that. We're all doing it all the time. And what breathwork can do, by allowing us to breathe freely and naturally, is allow the body to release and process those emotions. And this is a massive, massive topic. Okay, it's what I think a lot of people are experiencing, but don't necessarily realize that that's what they're loving, maybe about Wim Hof meditation or conscious connected breathing. And it's why some kinds of breathwork are often called like trauma release. And what I would say is that it's not really trauma release, it's emotional integration that's happening. The emotion that you've suppressed is allowed to come to the surface, and it probably turns out that the emotion is not a negative emotion after all. It's just an emotional experience. So that's just to clarify these two different ways of using breathwork that kind of support each other, which is we regulate our emotions, but we can also process our emotions with breathing, because the breath is what we use to suppress those emotions in the first place. And this leads me to kind of where I wanted to get to today, which is what I think is the next stage in all of this. So we've had this, we've had CBT being very popular, we've had mindfulness being very popular, we've had breathwork being very popular. And what I would say is that the next stage of that mind down versus body up graphic I just showed you is the realization, what that graphic really shows us is there is no difference between your mind and your body. And that the next stage for everybody is embodiment. So that's the idea that most of us, most people, because we're suppressing our emotions in large part, we're not really identified with our bodies. We're not experiencing our bodies in the moment. I think this is endemic because of social media, because of Netflix and things, where we can just, not only can we suppress our emotions physically, we can also direct our attention elsewhere at any time of day or night with something that can distract us now very, very easily. And so what embodiment is the reconnection to our bodies, reconnection to our bodies through feeling, through the felt senses. And this is what meditation promises, what mindfulness meditation promises. Mindfulness is being aware of our experience, which includes our physical sensations, which includes our thoughts as well. But because of the nature of how mindfulness is taught, where it's, hey, be aware of what's happening right now, but don't change your breathing, we may well be aware of what's happening, but because we're still using suppressive breathing unconsciously, we're not necessarily aware of what's really happening. Does that make sense? So we can breathe suppressively and not really connect to our bodies. Even though our attention is on our bodies, we're not connecting to the authentic experience because we're unconsciously suppressing our emotions. Okay, so I've gone through a lot of ideas very, very quickly. And I'm going to summarize it in two sort of very visual ways so it's more fun. The first of which is to introduce you to this, what I call my sensory spectrum ball, right? So if we imagine that this ball represents everything that you can experience in your life, but in particular in your immediate emotional experience. It's all contained in this ball. So everything you can see outside your body, everything you can smell, everything you are thinking right now, it's all inside this ball. And the different colors represent different layers of your experience. So the blue is your thoughts. This is what we're thinking. And the green is our immediate, outside environment. So right now I've got a window here, I've got this stuff behind me, I've got a bookshelf there that I'm aware of. That's what the green represents. And for most people, this is what they're aware of most of the time. Our attention is moving between our external environments, maybe there's some people in our environment, to our immediate thoughts, what we're thinking about that experience. And what happens is, through breathing, we can unlock deeper levels of our experience. So maybe it's almost like with every slow rhythmic breath we take, we connect more deeply into our bodies. And down here, this all represents our internal experience. And maybe this is our sensory experience on our external, so maybe our skin, right? And it's like when we breathe, the very first breath we take, we can start to sense into our bodies a lot more. And what happens in a breathwork session is we can tilt the balance of what we're aware of with each breath, each slow breath, till we are much more aware of what's happening internally in our bodies. And when we do that, we start to make connections between the thoughts that we're having and our internal experience. We start to recognize our internal experience, and that connects us to our intuition, to our insight, to all the things. If we're only here, we have a very incomplete picture of our world. But if we can learn to be embodied, if we can learn to connect to all of the experiences happening inside of ourselves as well as around ourselves, what we end up with is a much more balanced view of the world, where maybe thought isn't taking up so much of our attention. We're still aware of the outside world, but we're also aware of how we're responding to it inside of ourselves. And this is what embodiment is. This is basically a model of what embodiment is like. Most people are here. Through various practices, and breathwork being one of them, we can have a much clearer picture of our true experience of the world. And I'm going to share with you another sort of way of thinking about this, right, which is, it's been a lot of me talking, so I'm going to ask you to drop into the chat, anyone who's still with me, right? If I asked you to tell me what your 5 senses are, let's see what you think your 5 senses are. Probably learn them when you're in school. So let's drop into the chat what your 5 senses are. While people are doing that, I'll just check these comments in here. Grant mentioning the orgone accumulator and cloud bursting, yes. So talking about Wilhelm Reich there. Okay, so Jian, thank you. So Jian has got, these are coming through in different ways, which is lovely. So Jian says touch, smell, sight, and taste. Karen says vision, hearing, touch, smell, taste. Sight, hearing, smell, kinesthetic, and taste. Okay, so we're getting we're starting to see some of the other senses that we don't think about creeping in here, which is brilliant. So I'm going to give you the 5, right, as they're taught to you in primary school. We have our hearing, our sight, our sense of smell, taste, and touch. But depending on how you cut it, there's probably at least 16 senses. So it's a bit like last week where we thought about what can we change in our breath, and we probably got about 6 or 7 there. But actually there was even more the more we started to think about it. And a few have come through there. So Julie says interoception, and somebody else says proprioception. Thank you, Julie. Yeah, so a couple of these others are creeping in. Grant says intuition. That's lovely, yes. The first time I did this workshop, somebody put common sense, which I thought that's probably the rarest sense. And another person said telepathy, which maybe, I don't know. So we all agree, right, we have these 5 senses. But what the chat is showing us is that there's actually a couple more that we're not taught about in school, and that is really interesting because it betrays a cultural bias that we are subject to as people living with the language that we have. So the first thing I'm going to note about the 5 senses that we all agree on is that 4 of them are above the neck. So 4 of those senses are happening above the neck: hearing, sight, smell, and taste. The second thing I'm going to draw your attention to here is that all of those senses are focused on the external world. We're using our sight to see what's out there. We're using our smell to smell what's out there. We're using our hearing to hear what's out there. We can hear our bodies, but we very rarely focus on it, unless it's like, oh, right, maybe I ate something bad. We can smell our bodies, but it's still very external, maybe if we've not put deodorant on. But most of these senses, right, they're directed out. Even touch, which is the sense you could argue all of the extra senses I'm going to talk about are lumped into. Even touch is about touching something out there, noticing the textures of objects outside of ourselves. So they're above the neck and they're focused on the world as external. And that creates the illusion, right, that you are, or I am, a little man, you might be a little woman, inside your own head, somewhere above your neck, driving this vehicle through the world. And the senses that Pavlov's done a great job here, so interoception, proprioception, thermoception, neuroception. So these are all senses that are about where our body is in space, how we're feeling internally, or they're much more refined versions of touch. So touch isn't just one sense, it's actually an amalgamation of lots of different senses. So your touch is pain reception, it's thermoreception, it's texture reception. And there's even things like your sense of whether your muscles are tensing or not. That's its own sense. You can feel stretch receptors are telling you what's happening with your tendons inside of your body. Amber says equilibrioception, so your sense of balance, which is happening inside your ear, but it's measuring everything that's happening in your whole body, or it's giving you an indication of everything that's happening in your whole body. And we're never really taught about those senses as our senses, but they're just as important as those other 5 senses. If any of those senses were removed from your experience, you'd feel very strange. If you suddenly couldn't tell where your body was in space, it'd be very disorienting. If you suddenly couldn't feel temperature, you'd feel an absence, a real strange thing happening. And the final thing I want to mention is that even in extrapolating these senses as separate, that doesn't reflect our experience of the world. Because if I clap my hand, you hear it and see it, but you have one experience. Does that make sense? Your experience of the world is always holistic, and these senses are all overlapping. And for some people that presents as synesthesia, but even for you, if you raise your hands to the side of your head, and you can do this with me, and then just move them forward a little bit, and then just be aware of your hands in your visual field, and just move them back gently, slowly, and there's no hard edge to that ending. The hand just sort of gradually, it's there, and it's kind of there, and then it's not. And we never really think about that, right? The edge of your vision, but it's because you're having this whole experience. There is no edge to your experience between sight and sound until you close your eyes, but even then you're seeing stuff. So yeah, hopefully this is starting to make sense, right, where I'm going with this. We have a lot more happening inside of our bodies that we can be aware of. And breath work, by 2 avenues, can help us to sense into our bodies more and more and more. And I'd invite you, as I'm talking about this, just to have a think, and think about what benefits might there be to being able to feel your body as you're going through life. As you're going about your day, what benefit is there to being able to feel how your body responds to each new experience? And you can go ahead and write anything in the chat, okay, if you're having any thoughts there about what might be beneficial about just being able to feel more clearly, more deeply. And as we're doing that, I'll just give you an insight into this isn't just hippie mumbo jumbo. This is scientific. So, yeah, last week I should say we talked about how each breath can change your heart rate, and by breathing slowly, we slow the heart rate down. And by doing that, that's an indication that our breathing is affecting what's called the vagus nerve. So you may have heard of the vagus nerve. Vagus nerve is traveling through your whole body. It's connecting your brain to all of your vital organs throughout your torso. And 80% of the information happening on that nerve is traveling up from the body to the brain. And it goes through different stages of activity. But the more relaxed we are, the more active the vagus nerve is, the more information is traveling from the body to the brain. And as we do our breath work shortly, I'd like to invite you to notice what's changing for you as we get deeper into the experience, because you might notice that it's a lot easier to sense into your body when we're doing the breath work. So some brilliant suggestions coming through in the chat and why being embodied might be beneficial. Lily says, feel more attuned and more responsive. Karen says, greater sense of connection and authenticity, being aware of our gut reaction. With awareness, we can choose how to respond. Lovely, lovely suggestions coming in here. Amber says, I coach children with suspected ADHD and symptoms disappear with regulation from various modalities, brackets, breath work. Lots of brilliant suggestions coming in here. Pleasure, safety, having more options versus feeling stuck. Jan says clarity and vitality. I love the word vitality, Jan. Increased capacity, make you less reactive, more aware of the moment, says Sam. Just loads of reasons, right, why having this as our default, being in our bodies, could be beneficial. And we talked last week about how breath work can improve our heart rate variability. It can improve our heart's ability to vary its rate from one moment to the next. And that's an indication of nervous system health. And having better heart rate variability is a sign of your vagus nerve being very attuned to your body. And that's basically going to give you all of these wonderful benefits. It's going to be the gateway to having connection to your body. Christina has a lovely suggestion there. For grief, you can hold your ring finger of one hand with all the fingers of the other hand and integrate the grief. So that might be from yoga, I'm imagining. Oh, is it? It's from Qigong. Lovely. Jane says, it just gives us time to pause. Lovely. So we're almost at the hour, and then we're going to have a 30-minute practice. I thought I would just read you a poem, because I like, with a captive audience, subjecting you to my poetry. And this poem is going to summarize what we're talking about here. And the poem is called One-Handed Meditation. So it's about trying to meditate with one hand rather than our mind. My senses take one hand to count, but fingers is the wrong amount. I can see it's my hand, that much is easy. Smells like my hand, tastes a bit greasy. It makes the sound of one hand clapping. And it makes a tapping, slapping, snapping. But that's when things start overlapping. My thumb feels my fingers my thumb. I can feel when it hurts, and I can't when it's numb. I can feel all its creases, its edges and bevels. And inside it, I can feel my own energy levels. When I'm hungry, it's weak. When I'm full, it feels tired. It knows when I'm thirsty. Got a cup of tea here, actually. And it shakes if I'm wired. The muscles inside it all tense and relax. And I can feel when its tendons are stretched to the max. It knows when it's hot, and it's cold when it's not. And it can even tell how much breath I've got. It knows when to say swivel, and it knows when to beckon. And if the time came, I reckon, it could count to 5 seconds. If there's an itch on my skin, my hand knows where to scratch it. And if I lose my balance, it will reach out and catch it. To move any object, it knows how to match it. I just pick up this bit and throw it at that bit. The boundaries between these all lack in precision. They're just words after all. There's no edge to your vision. So thank you for listening to my poem. I'm going to give us a couple of minutes now, so we'll just have 3 minutes to grab any cushions that you might need for a practice. And we're going to breathe again this week with RA Piano, just because I know there's lots of beginners here. And this is the simplest breathwork track to breathe with from the Aria Breath Library. If you have not breathed with me before, what we're going to do is something that I call harmonic breathwork. You might have called it coherent breathing or resonant frequency breathing. And if you are completely new to this, all we're doing is slowing our breath down from our usual rate, which is usually above 12 breaths per minute, all the way down to 5 breaths per minute. And when we do that, we create a resonance in the system, on the cardiovascular system, that's very, very good for us, because as we very briefly touched on last week, when you breathe slowly, your heart rate slows down, but it also changes with each breath. So every time you breathe in, your heart rate gently speeds up. Every time you breathe out, your heart rate gently slows down. And that effect is more pronounced when you breathe very, very slowly. And when you do it for long periods of time, so anything over sort of 15 minutes, you will experience deep states of relaxation, because there's this accumulative effect. Every slow breath we take out, it's almost like a push-up, but for our body's ability to relax instead of get stronger. And so there's a lasting benefit to doing this. So what I will do is I'll suggest that if you need a bio break of any kind right now, please go, because I'm just going to talk for another 3 minutes. But if you want to grab cushions, or you want to get comfortable in any way, I do recommend being as relaxed as possible in a relaxed position for this practice, because what we're really doing here is very different to formal meditation, where we need to be sitting up and paying attention. What we're really doing is using the breath to change what's happening in the nervous system. And so, yeah, there's no need for you to be uncomfortable or anything like that if you're new to this. I'm just going to read some comments coming in. So, some people are being very positive about my poem. Thank you very much. Somebody asking, did I say 15 or 50 minutes? So just 15 minutes, Ramona. You can do this for 5 minutes and it'll have an impact. But there's something that I call the magic moment. And that's when your body relaxes of its own accord, which happens after about 15 minutes of doing this. For some people it's 12, for some people it's like 17 minutes. But you'll probably notice it now. And the saddest thing about this is that this kind of slow breathing is mentioned in almost every breathwork book you'll read. So James Nestor's book Breath, Jesse Kuma's book The Practical Guide to Breathwork, all these books, they talk about it. But because it's a technique that's not very flashy and sexy, it doesn't get much attention, and especially because it's an accumulative effect, right? So you can do it for 5 minutes and go, that was a pretty weird experience, right? Okay, well, on to the next thing. But if you do it for 15 minutes or more, you'll enter a state that you think, wow, this is the state of relaxation I've been looking for. Ramona asks, is this superior to conscious connected breath in terms of benefits, Tom? So Ramona, I don't want to diss conscious connected breathing, but the benefits are different. So this kind of breathing is for emotional regulation, whereas conscious connected breathwork is about emotional release. Personally, I prefer this because I think it does both. It's just not as immediately obvious to people that they are releasing emotion and processing emotion. because when you do conscious connected breathing, for those of you who are new to this, it's a very intense, or it can be a very intense kind of breathing where you're, and that's not what we're doing here. We're going to be breathing gently in through the nose and allowing the experience to accumulate through the slow breathing. Amber says, Aria is so gentle yet effective. Thank you, Amber. So yeah, while people are still grabbing what they need, maybe having a bio break, I'll just mention that in 3 weeks I will be doing the next Breathe in Harmony course, which is a 6-week course that I do every year. And if you join the course, you also get lifetime access to the Aria Breath Music Library, which is a library of hundreds of pieces of music that you can breathe in time with and achieve this state. So it's on the course we learn, the depths of the technique, how to get the most out of it, what it might be changing in our bodies, and but you can take away the app so that you can have loads of choice with how you practice it. Because why I call it harmonic breathwork is that we do it with music in Aria. It's all well and good telling people, hey, why don't you try breathing for 5 or 6 breaths per minute? But without a guide, which is what we use music for in Aria breath, it's very difficult to stay consistent. So we're going to be using a piano track. Juliana, Tom, is this audio track in the Aria library? So are you talking about the poem, Juliana, or the track we're going to breathe with? Let me know in the chat. Okay, so I'm just going to close that window and I think we are looking pretty comfortable and ready to start. Okay, so the audio we're going to be breathing with is called Aria Piano. That's the first track in the Aria library because it's so easy to breathe with. And it's just 4 notes, 4 high notes and 4 low notes. And I'm just going to guide us in a short breath awareness practice before we get into the musical breathwork. So the music we're listening to now is just some relaxing music. It's not to be breathing with. Just for a few minutes while we all get relaxed and ready for our breathwork. So this is just relaxing music. It's not to be breathed with. And what I'm going to invite you to do is just wherever you are, seeing if you can make yourself just a little bit more comfortable. Maybe shifting where your feet are, shifting the sort of distribution of your body. Maybe your shoulders can soften and relax a little bit. Maybe your hands will be more comfortable on your belly or by your side. There's no right way of doing this. There's no right way to have your body to get relaxed. It's just whatever way is going to help you relax the most. And then just taking a nice slow, deep breath here through the nose. And maybe for now just letting it out through the mouth. And notice that as you breathe out, breathing slowly and gently and deeply, every out-breath is a relaxation of the body. Every out-breath, you're relaxing the diaphragm, softening the diaphragm, just allowing the out-breath to happen. And now breathing through the nose and noticing that as you breathe out, the relaxation of the diaphragm allows you to relax other areas of your body more easily. So breathing in through the nose, breathing out through the nose. And as you do that, relaxing the shoulders as you breathe out. Just see what it's like to experiment with consciously relaxing your body with every out breath. And the ideal breath here goes into the belly. Because if the belly is moving as we breathe, it's a sign that we are using our diaphragm. So it can be hard to know, am I using my diaphragm? If your belly is moving, it's a good sign you're doing everything perfectly. Letting the belly rise as you breathe in and fall as you breathe out. And this breath can always be gentle. We're not trying to fill the lungs with air. We're not trying to empty them completely. It's just gentle, nasal, belly breathing. And we don't have to think anything or do anything with our minds. Just softening the body with every breath out. And however we're breathing now, just breathing naturally, see if you can notice if there's a tiny pause at the end of your exhalation. So at the end of your out breath, there might just be a tiny pause before you breathe back in, just seeing what it's like to notice that. And breathe in. You might find it's easy to rest in that pause and just have a little pause at the end of the out breath and then breathe in. And just see what it's like to breathe out, almost as though you're breathing in slow motion. So really extending the length of the exhalation now. Breathing out slowly through the nose, letting the belly fall, and breathing in. And if the music feels too slow for you when it starts, just know that it's okay for you to pause at any point during the process. It's okay for you just to breathe naturally, just to ignore the music. It's okay. If the out-breath feels too slow or fast, just doing what feels comfortable for you. So in a minute you're going to hear the piano, and we're going to breathe in with the high notes and out with the low notes. But we're just going to take 3 sighs together just to synchronize our breathing, so we're breathing together. So breathing in through the nose. Letting go. And in through the nose. Last one, in through the nose. And breathing in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. There's the high notes, breathing in. There's the low notes, breathing out. In, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. Breathing in. Breathing out. Breathing in. Breathing out. In gently. Out slowly. Breathing in, letting the belly gently rise. Breathing out, letting it fall. In, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. In. Out. You can be really patient with your body as you get used to the music. If it feels like the in-breath is over too fast, just pause and let go. And if it feels like the out-breath is over too fast, just pause and breathe in. You don't have to get this right first time. Breathing in and breathing out. If you feel like you need to sigh, a big sigh at any point, that's really okay. Just let your body do whatever it needs to do to feel comfortable. Breathing in and breathing out. See how smoothly you can breathe. Belly rising and gently falling. Breathing in and out through the nose. Just know this practice gets easier and easier throughout. And every time you practice, it feels easier and more comfortable. And you may find that you need less and less air, and that's perfectly natural. That's just a sign that your body has everything that it needs. Breathing in breathing out. In out. It's very natural as we're concentrating for a little bit of tension to enter the body. But just know that you can let go of tension with every breath out. In out, softening the muscles of the face. In eyelids, eyebrows softening. Cheeks, jaw, neck, softening. Breathing in. Shoulders, arms, hands, softening. Fingertips softening as you breathe out. Breathing in. Breathing out, letting the belly be soft. Hips, knees, feet softening. Whole body softening with this breath out. It's perfectly okay for your mind to wander. It's just processing. Just bringing your awareness back to the music, back to your breathing. In, 2, 3, 4, out. With every breath, bring your awareness deeper into your body. Noticing all of the sensations that let you know that your body is still here. Vibrations in the hands, temperature of your legs, with sensation. Vibrations. All changing with every breath you take. In out. The feelings flowing, just like the breath. And feelings don't have to be strong to be powerful. It's when we're aware of subtle sensations that we unlock our true intuition. What sensations are standing out to you now? And how are they changing? Breathing in, breathing out. In a moment, the music will gently fade, but you don't need to do anything. You can stay right where you are as we let the benefits of the practice sink in. So as the music fades, keeping the eyes closed, allowing the breath to find its own natural rhythm. Allowing the body just to rest here. Allowing the breath to flow through the body. very natural for the breath to feel slower now. Every in-breath nourishing your whole body. Every out-breath cleansing your whole body. Just notice how it feels to have breathed slowly. How does the body feel? How does the mind feel? And if you feel restored and rested, if this feels good to you, how would it be to give your body this rest every day? Because any positive response is something you have created with your breath by practicing. And just know that the benefits of this practice are something you will take into the rest of your evening or your morning. A shift of the nervous system will echo through your day, helping you be more in tune with yourself. And so, bringing your awareness to your breath, to the air going in and out of your nose, to the sensations of the ground beneath you, supporting you. Everywhere your body is supported, your feet, your legs, your back if you're lying down, and becoming aware of those primary senses now, the sound in the room around you, sound outside and in your body. Gently opening the eyes, noticing the colors, shapes, and beginning to bring movement back into your hands and your feet. And depending on what you want to do now, it's up to you. You can stay right where you are if you're feeling super relaxed. Or you can begin to get to seated very slowly by resting on your right hand side and being very patient with your body as you slowly bring yourself up to seated. And so, because I talk far too much, we only did about 17 minutes of breathing with the music there. The track was called Aria Piano, for those asking in the chat. And that's the first track in the Aria Breath library. So, because it's so simple, it's perfect for beginners. And the tracks get more and more complex, more and more emotionally stimulating, depending on your taste, different genres. But just noticing whether in a relaxed state you were able to notice more about what's happening inside your body. And if that was your first experience, that might not have happened for you. I don't know if you can hear that very relaxing rain suddenly on my window. Perfect timing. Christina says she's feeling very much in tune with herself now. That's lovely, Christina. And when we shift the nervous system like that, it's going to change how we perceive the world outside as well. So not only does it allow us to feel more deeply into ourselves, but it changes how we see the world. So if we're in a very sympathetic state, we're more likely to see the world as threatening outside. If we're in a very calm state, we're more likely to see the connections between things. So thank you very much for joining me on this relaxing Sunday evening. I will hang out for questions. Just a reminder, in case you were not here at the beginning, next week we will have one of my favourite breathworkers as a special guest, Belisa Vranic. So hopefully see you there.